I've gained from feminism, and I think feminism has done a lot of good. And women, as I said earlier, have a lot of rights and a lot of opportunities nowadays that we would not have had if it hadn't been for feminists in the past. Whether that still means that there's a role for feminism nowadays, I'm less certain. I think the problem nowadays is that, as I said, the more feminism becomes distant from the reality of women's lives, the less helpful it becomes. My concern is that, especially for the youngest women nowadays, the more feminism insists on telling them, you're victims, the world's a terrible place, you go out into the workplace and everything's going to be absolutely awful for you, the more young women really come to believe that. And I think that can actually hold young women back. So you look at these surveys that are done on kind of 14, 15, 16-year-old girls. They were carried out on girls who are in the Girl Guides in the UK. And it's like 82% or some ridiculously high figure like that are worried about sexual harassment in the workplace. So these are girls who are not at work, who've had no experience of sexual harassment in the workplace. And so they're not talking about their experiences, they are projecting into the future of what they think might happen to them. And where have they picked up this message from that, when they go out to work, they're going to get sexually harassed? And my worry is that they've picked up that message from feminism. So one big campaign group in the UK is called Everyday Sexism. And it kind of gets people to write in their experiences of sexism. And they do have some kind of really serious things reported, but they also have a hell of a lot of very trivial things. Someone stood too near me. Someone stood up and offered me the seat on the train. That was sexist. Someone didn't stand up and offer me their seat on the train. That was sexist. Someone didn't tidy up after a party. There are all these kind of things which are essentially, if not trivial, then certainly very, very subjective. What somebody might experience as sexist, somebody else might just think, well, that was just something that happened, or not even think twice about it. But the more we give this message to young people, young girls growing up, the world's a terrible place and you're at a disadvantage and everyone's out to get you, the harder we actually make it for them. And as soon as they do hit obstacles in the workplace, which, hey, everybody does, part of growing up is overcoming obstacles. The danger is, as soon as they begin to hit some obstacles, they think, yes, this is what I've been told about. This is the sexism. This is the patriarchy. This was what I was warned against. And they then give up at the first hurdle. And, my fear is that that's what feminism's become.
Welcome to Sacred Cows. My name is Andrij Zip. Today I have someone I'm really looking forward to. Dr. Joanna Williams is an educator and the education editor at Spiked. She's an author. Her latest book is Academic Freedom in an Age of Conformity, and her new book that's coming out in October is Women versus Feminism, Why We All Need Liberating from the Gender Wars. And I'm totally looking forward to reading that. And Joanna Williams, welcome to Sacred Cows.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
All right, so we're going to be talking about feminism today, Joanna. First question, are air conditioners sexist?
No, well, I have a lot of sympathy with this argument because I'm someone who manages to feel cold all the time. But I know there's been quite a few news reports about air conditioning supposed to be sexist because women feel cold in the office and men don't even notice they're busy taking the top jobs and women are there shivering in the corner. But I think this is really typical of what's happened to feminism nowadays. It's kind of become really banal and trivial. And I think what's happened is that as women have made more and more progress in society, genuinely taking more of the top jobs, earning the same as men, doing better at school than boys. And, feminism, to justify its existence, needs to look into more trivial smaller areas to try and find disadvantage, to say that women are still disadvantaged in the workplace or disadvantaged at school. And I think the air conditioning example is, a very good illustration of how feminism does this. It's precisely because women are taking the jobs and taking the top jobs that we can start talking about things like air conditioning. Kind of shows one of the main issues of lumping everybody together according to gender, because now that I stop and think about it seriously for more than 30 seconds, I made a joke saying I've got a lot of sympathy with this because I always feel cold. But by the same token, I know just as many women who don't feel cold all the time. And this assumption that, your gender determines your feelings in relation to heat and what temperature you'd like the air conditioning to be set at is just bizarre. And it's feminism, it seems to me nowadays, that insists on looking at every single issue through the prism of gender. And there's an awful lot of issues out there where gender's just irrelevant.
Because it seems like a lot of people just lump feminists all together and say, like, oh, they worry about air conditioners being sexist and the gender wage gap. But is it all feminists, or is it, say, third wave feminists that have these crazy radical views?
I think that's a very, very good question. Obviously, there are lots of different types of feminism, and you can trace, and I do in my book, trace the history of feminism. You can go right back from the suffragettes. You can look at second wave feminism and some of the very, very important victories, I think, that were won in the 1960s and 1970s for equal pay, for women's rights to have access to jobs and to work, and for girls to have equal educational opportunities to boys. And then you can move on to third wave feminism in the kind of 1990s. And people today, there's a lot of discussion about whether this is fourth wave feminism or intersectional feminism. And even within all of those things, you have black feminism, lesbian feminism. There's so many different types of feminism. It's very easy for people to say, oh, but, this isn't the type of feminism that we're on about. I think on the one hand, yes, you have all these different splintered groups, but at the same time, there's a kind of dominant narrative that appears in the mainstream media about feminism. I guess I'm thinking of people like Jessica Valenti, Lena Dunham. These people hit the pages of mainstream newspapers, and this view that they put forward, I think, doesn't have anything to do with sexuality or skin color. But to me, what connects it is this overarching attempt to present women as being disadvantaged and present women as being victims, whether that's in the workplace or in the street or in education. And, as I was saying earlier, the more distant that becomes from the reality of women's lives today, the more successes women are having, the harder you have to work to justify women's status as victims, the more obscure sites they have to go, the harder they have to try to dig up areas to prove that women are still disadvantaged. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think, there's lots of different types of feminism, but I think you get... You run the risk of going down a bit of a rabbit hole when you start trying to identify all these different types of feminism. But there is definitely one dominant narrative, which I would call a kind of victim feminism that seems to dominate nowadays.
I think one criticism you hear of feminism is that it's become obsessed with identity politics and bashing men. Is that, in your opinion, a fair criticism of contemporary feminism?
Yeah, I think the more you highlight the idea that women are disadvantaged, then the more you inevitably start, and particularly when, like you say, women are statistically doing better than ever before, the more you have to locate the source of this disadvantage of lying in men. And this is where we then get kind of this talk about the patriarchy, which, frankly, I just find a little bit bizarre nowadays. I don't think the patriarchy exists in any meaningful sense in the way it maybe did 100 years ago. The men who I see in my life have, as many differences between them as they have similarities. And I see some men who do very, very well in life, have good jobs, are very, very successful. And I see a lot of men who don't have good jobs and are not leading very wealthy, very successful lives. And the idea that all men can be lumped together in one group and kind of labeled the patriarchy is just frankly bizarre and not reality. But I think the more women are doing better statistically, like I said, the more obscure examples you find of women's oppression, the more the cause of that gets placed at men's behaviour, at kind of individual men's bad behaviour. So if you take work, for example, women are, more likely to be in work than they were in the past. They're more likely to be working full time than they were in the past. They're more likely to be entering the professions. They're more likely to be taking the top jobs. And so to explain women's continued disadvantage, we kind of start talking about men as microaggressing in the office. And then this is where you get all these terms like mansplaining in meetings, appropriating women's ideas in meetings. This is feminism that belongs in the nursery, because this is not adult women's lives, and yet we use these kind of silly words, and it's about male behavior, because when there are no legal infringements upon women achieving pretty much whatever they want to in life, the only thing that seems to get the blame then is individual men's bad behaviour lumped together as some kind of expression of the patriarchy.
Well, it seems like a lot of feminism, it's nested or rooted in Marxism, the idea that the oppressor and the oppressed. Is that a fair estimation, you think, to say?
I think, obviously there is an obsession with oppressor and oppressed, but I think really this grew quite distinct from Marxism as far back as the 1960s, 1970s, because feminism moved away from, and to me this is one of the problems with feminism nowadays, is that it refuses to see social class as a way of understanding society. As soon as you start pitching people against each other on the basis of gender, then you remove social class really as an effective way of explaining. You just remove social class as a kind of means of understanding how society works. And I think this is especially the case the more we get into fourth wave feminism, which, exactly as you were saying, is really an expression of identity politics. And the more we get into identity politics and feminism as the ultimate expression of identity politics, the further we go from social class. And I think, to me, social class still has some useful resonance in being able to explain the way the world is nowadays. I think men and women have far more in common with each other within social class than they do with members of a different social class. And I think the further we go from understanding the world in terms of social class, and the more we move towards gender distinctions, that we move away from Marxism, but we do so in a way that's really, really unhelpful.
Within the feminist movement now, there's, I guess it's tied to the identity politics. It's an embrace of not just Islam, but saying like things like the hijab is empowering, and so for example, marching on Washington, screaming about the patriarchy and putting vaginas on your head, but then completely ignoring the abuse that Muslim women face in Muslim majority countries. Can you comment on that? Like, it seems like they're very strange bedfellows.
Definitely, but I think you really see that in so much of feminism nowadays. And, in part it stems to what you were saying earlier, about these different types of feminism. But it seems to even be within the kind of one strand of feminism as well, where there are just these real inherent contradictions. So if you look at the whole thing about the Women's March, like you say, and you've got the pussy symbol as becoming the kind of anti-Trump protest symbol of choice, and it didn't really make the news in the end, but I know even up until like a month ago there was a model of a vagina being created and stuffed with letters from university students all around the country. The idea that this would be delivered to the White House. You've got a museum of the vagina that's about to be started. You've got this absolute kind of fetishization of a female body part on the one hand, but then on the other hand you've got this idea that gender is completely socially constructed, that anyone can be a woman nowadays, they just have to declare themselves a woman. And to me those two things are very, very contradictory. On the one hand, to fetishize a kind of biological form, and you see this with other things as well. I mean, with the kind of obsession with talking about periods, and we had a marathon runner in the UK a couple of years ago who had her period when she was doing the marathon and insisted on free bleeding as if this was some kind of great feminist statement. And, to go back to talking about women in the workplace, the idea that, I mean, this is, again, it's kind of completely bizarre, but this is a real thing in the newspaper, that women should be able to have a day off work when it's their period. To me, these kind of take women back 50, 60 years. Women, to me, feminism at its best was about fighting that women didn't want to be restricted and defined by their biology. They wanted to be able to not to deny female biology, but to say that women were more than just the sum total of their bodies. They were able to compete in the world as equals with men. We wanted to be more than just our biology. So on the one hand, you have this kind of real effort to fetishize female biology. And then, like I said, this whole idea that as soon as you do, you then get accused of being transphobic, of not recognizing that gender is as a fluid construct and you can be anywhere on a spectrum. So you have all these things which are very contradictory trends and yet somehow sit alongside each other, and it doesn't make any sense. It's not rational.
Well, no, it seems like it's like I was saying about like say Islam and feminism being strange bedfellows. It seems like feminism and everything to do with like being transgendered, like again, very strange bedfellows. Like I can see like a feminist saying, I was born a woman. This isn't just a part of my identity, like in a superficial way. I'm a genuine, like, who are you to just think that you can just on a whim or because you feel like a woman that you are a woman? That's ridiculous. But then you might.
This is true, though, and there have been some high-profile feminists who have come out and made that exact argument. And, in America and in the UK, this argument has been made. But the thing that I find really disturbing about that argument, it's an argument I've got an awful lot of sympathy with, but the way the argument is pitched is it's presented exactly as you say, but it's how dare you come and claim our suffering when you don't know what it's like to have lived as a woman. You've just become a woman later in life. You didn't grow up female, and it's only through growing up female that you fully experience suffering in the way that women do. You experience the full extent of how being a woman makes you a victim. And so rather than saying in a really positive way, actually being a woman does have some connection with biology, it becomes about competing claims to victimhood. Who is the most victimized, the transgender woman or the cis woman, the born woman? And it's this kind of competition over who has suffered most. And, again, if that's feminism, it's not something I really want to be part of, because I don't see myself as a victim and I don't want to get into having a competition with people over who's suffered most. I don't see anything helpful about that at all.
you think it's fair to say like we're kind of, I think we're moving into okay, I'm speaking as a man, but it seems for a lot of, I've talked to a lot of women, it seems that we're moving into almost a post-feminine era. Like I work in my day job, I work in a blue-collar environment. I work for the railway in Canada. And I've talked to women, I've asked them about feminism. They despise feminism. And these are women who, like, they're not living some sheltered life. Like, they're, like, to me, they're genuine feminists. Even though they don't identify themselves, it's like they've like, to them, the idea of gender and what you can do and can't do or shouldn't do is meaningless to them. Like, they're women who are working and doing a great job in a typically male-dominated field. And to them, the whole, I think for them, the idea of feminism is, it's patronizing and it's condescending, because it's like, you know what, I got here not because I'm a woman and I battle the patriarchy and all that. It's I did this on my own merit, like this, and they want nothing to do with feminism. Is that? Do you think though? But my question is: it fair to say that there is a room, like maybe we are entering a post-feminist era?
Yeah, I mean, those women that you describe, I mean, they sound like the type of people I would like to be friends with. And, you know, I completely agree with you. I think they are actually the best kind of feminists. And I think like I said, the problem is I don't think we've entered a post-feminist era, unfortunately. I would like us to enter a post-feminist era. But I think in some ways feminism, again, this comes back to what I was saying earlier about these contradictions. I think at the same time as feminism becomes more distant from the reality of most working regular women's lives, the type of women exactly as you've just been describing, it's almost as if the more dominant it becomes then in the mainstream media, the more influential it becomes within academia, and it becomes to characterize kind of elite opinion. You know, in some circles, to say that you're not a feminist is enough to kind of get you absolutely castigated. And suddenly I've said in certain settings that I'm not a feminist, and people would be absolutely horrified. And, you know, how can you possibly say such a thing? You know, do you not realize, blah, 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 you're a woman. Yeah. You believe in equality. Go away and look in a dictionary. You don't know what feminism means. And then they said to me, well, of course you're a feminist. You're just denying it. And you're right. This is essentially very patronizing to tell people what they are and what they can and can't be. But again, it's this, you know, surveys come out and they show that fewer and fewer women do identify themselves as feminists. And yet at the same time, like I say, within academia, within the media, within the culture at large, it's as dominant as ever.
Mm. And it's the other thing. It's interesting to see, though, a lot of women who would probably call themselves feminists, but are extreme critics of feminism. For example, Christina Hoff Sommers, who's, you know, I think like a lot of people would label her as being right wing or an anti-feminist, despite nothing of the sort. I think she just criticizes feminism and calls out a lot of its like just batshit lunacy, in my opinion. Or like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, like someone who's championing for you know against the misogyny that exists within the Islamic faith and things like against feminine or female genital mutilation, but she's, you know, feminists want nothing to do with her, despite the fact, like, to me, she's one of the the greatest voices in feminism out there. What do you think about women like say, for example, those two women that I just said? And I guess
I mean, I have a lot of time for both of those women. You know, big fans of both of them, and I think, you know, at its worst, I think nowadays feminism becomes a kind of mean girls clique, and you need to have the correct vocabulary, you need to dress in a certain way, and you need to look a certain way. And, you know, for all feminism has these pretensions to be liberating and liberal and tolerant, it's actually the opposite of all of those things. And, you know, some women are acceptable. So you look at, say, someone like Ivanka Trump and all the criticism that she will get, you know, and some women are, you know, you have the right kind of women and you have the wrong kind of women. And feminism, it seems to me, comes with a very, very strict rule book. And if you want to be part of the feminist clique, you need to know these rules, and you need to have the correct vocabulary, you need to dress the correct way, you must not have plastic surgery, you must not talk about being on a diet too much, you must not, there's very strict rules that you must abide by at all times. And I think the fear of stepping out of line and saying the wrong thing, and being thrown out of the feminist clique is, a threat that hangs over people and makes people, lose interest in feminism, and be makes feminism itself incredibly censorious. If you look at a lot of the controversies that have been sparked on university campuses over the past 12 months, where speakers have been banned, the number of times that feminist arguments have been behind those calls for censorship, as if women are such kind of wilting flowers that they need the safe space with the colouring books and the puppy dogs, they need the trigger warnings, and again, that's not an image of feminism that I would relate to. To me, feminism is about saying women are strong. Women can do anything. Women can take part in debates. Women don't need to retreat to the safe space, because women fought to get to university, and it was a long struggle for women to be able to get to university. But they wanted to go to university to get the same education that men had. They did not fight to get to university to have a safe space to sit in with Play-Doh and colouring books. That is so insulting to all those women who really fought to get women into higher education. But when you create this feminism with rules, and the number one rule is always to be a victim, it seems to me, when you create this feminism with rules and you set people up who can then break the rules, feminism becomes incredibly censorious.
Well, it seems like a lot of the women who should be revered by feminism aren't, because they aren't victims, because they are strong women.
Exactly.
And it's like, it seems like it's more important for feminists, like, number one, it's more important to be a feminist than it is to be a woman, which it seems like it's so myopic, and it's become like they can't see the forest for the trees. And when it seems like if it's reached that point that feminism is doing something good, when women don't even, like, not every woman, but some women don't feel they don't need feminism because they're just fine on their own.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think, we're not going to see the end of feminism anytime soon, because I think it's become so ingrained as kind of people's, for people who are in the social elite, it's become, and influential, it's become so ingrained as kind of part of their way of understanding and thinking and making sense of the world. And they are the people who are, in the positions of influence in academia, in the media, and they are the ones who are kind of setting the rules. And obviously then, as we said, what happens is it just becomes more and more distant from the lives of regular people, regular women. You've got regular women go about their lives and get on. But in terms of actually progressing society, of making the world a better place for everyone, which at one point, again, was the aim of feminism. And that's why, go back 60, 70 years, men would be feminists because it was understood that men wouldn't be liberated until women were truly equal as well. But you're right, feminism nowadays become so inherently tied up with identity and what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a feminist, that this idea that it would liberate everyone is just not, that's just not really there anymore. It's much more about a kind of declaration of identity, a declaration of victimhood.
What do you...
Sorry, I was just going to say, in terms of making the world a better place, this is where it becomes really problematic, because essentially you've got a small group of socially elite women who have had the best education money can buy, who are now taking the top jobs, who have got the place on the board of directors, who are essentially interested, essentially protecting their own interests and growing increasingly disparate from the same women who are kind of booking the meeting rooms, making the sandwiches, making the coffees, looking after the babies of this kind of elite group of women. And, for the women who are not at the top of the heap, their interests are much better fought alongside men. men who are in the same position as them, rather than trying to find some common core with women who are at the top of the social hierarchy.
Okay, Joanna, it's been really great talking. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed our conversation here. Is there anything you want to leave our viewers with before we go? Where can we find you online?
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
I should probably say at this point now, it's kind of very late now, UK time, so my brain's switched off a little bit. People will have to forgive me. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at Joe Williams 293. So yeah, that'd be really great if people could follow me on Twitter.
Okay, awesome.
And read my articles on Spiked as well.
Awesome, we'll do it. Yeah, and I think I know myself, I'm really looking forward to your book that's coming out in the fall.
Thank you.
So awesome. Thanks again, Joanna. I really appreciated you talking to me, and thank you for being on Sacred Cows.
Pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.